All right,
Gareth, I
everybody.
think every
Say again, sorry.
I think everything is working here.
Perfect. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. It's great to see you. Welcome back to the third in our series of Prophy Predicts online events in which we discuss not what's happening now in scholarly publishing and research and the future, but we talk about what's going to be happening or our predictions for what will be happening in 2 to 5 years into the future. My name's Gareth Dyke. I work with Prophy, like putting together and hosting these events. This one, it's the third in our series. It's called The Future of Scientific Funding. And what we've done for this one is we've assembled an expert panel, 4 expert perspectives that we're going to get over the next few minutes on where academic evaluation is headed in the future. So I'm delighted to welcome for our event today Anne Campbell, who's the Director of Research Impact and Comparative Analytics at Digital Science. Dr. Nouran Hamza, who's the CEO of Mars Global, which is a medical and statistical consultancy company, very involved in grants and funding across the world, but especially in the MENA, the Gulf and Middle East region. Also, Mathïs Federico, who's somebody that you may have heard of with disruptive ideas about peer review. He's the founder of Bycelium. I'm sure he'll introduce that in a moment. And also Rob Johnson, who's the founder and managing director of Research Consulting Limited. So what we're going to do at the start of our event today is go to each of our panelists and ask them to give us their initial response to a question that we asked them in advance of this event, which was, over the next 2 to 5 years, can AI and data-driven models move grant funding beyond traditional metrics like journal prestige or citation counts? Can these be used to accurately predict the long-term impact and potential of risk or high-reward research? Where are we going with research funding and the assessment of research funding into the future? And with that all said, and thank you once again for joining us, either here on Zoom or on LinkedIn Live, let's go over and ask Anne Campbell from Digital Science to get us going today. Anne, how are you doing? Everything going well?
Yeah, all good, Gareth. Thanks. Hello from sunny Belfast today. I'm not used to the sunshine. So thanks for inviting me. A quick introduction to myself. So my name's Anne Campbell. Gareth had given me a quite long title. I work with digital science. So we are a portfolio of lots of different products that help with research evaluation or the research landscape, data insights into that. You might know of Dimensions, Altmetric, Figshare, Overleaf, Elements. They're one of our better known products. I work with Dimensions and Altmetric data. So within Dimensions, we have it's a whole data ecosystem with information. There's over 164 million publications. We have data on grants. We have agreements with funders. With over 700 funders, so we have all of that metadata around the funding and grant applications, data sets, clinical trials, lots of different elements from the research landscape. And these are all interlinked within the data set. So we can do a lot of analysis over time and on the research landscape. So that's the type of data that I get to work with, which is really exciting because it can answer lots of different questions. AI has been a game changer, and I'm funny you're talking about over the next 2 to 5 years. I think even over the past 6 months, things have really changed, so it's very hard to predict even over the next year or so. So the question that you had asked, I had three thoughts, and sorry, I'm looking up here because I'm reading from my notes because I will go off on a tangent if I don't. The three things that came to mind and how funding can change, or maybe we were talking about peer review and things. I would think there's three elements there. So how AI can impact. So maybe peer reviewers, first of all, finding peer reviewers that are suitable for a particular funding call. This is really important, and AI can really help refine that or help funders with that, mainly now due to interdisciplinary research when it's a bit more difficult to get experts in particular areas or crossing over different areas. I think decision making as well, there's maybe a thought that might replace decision making, but not to it. It can maybe validate partnerships and then how pathways to impact are assessed. So this is more to do with my answer, which I'll just read out. What I had said initially was over the next few years, I don't think AI will be able to reliably or accurately predict breakthrough discoveries. It hasn't done in the past, or these models, citation models, haven't done that in the past because of their unexpected and innovative nature, these new innovative discoveries. But I do believe that it will definitely improve how funders can identify emerging areas, just unconventional collaborations, and then those early translation signals that are out there. We've already worked with a lot of data in that, and traditional metrics will often miss these citation counts. They will miss these early indicators. So I think by try analysing the research trajectories, those collaboration networks, those emerging cross-sector influences, that funding agencies can maybe move towards those traditional proxies like journal prestige or citation counts, and just develop that richer picture of the potential research that they're looking at. And I think the real opportunity isn't in predicting the next breakthroughs and mapping to that, but creating the systems that are better able to recognize those ideas and researchers that might otherwise be overlooked. So AI changes maybe just the evidence that a reviewer can see. And I think that the risk in schemes like things, the risk is often not funding the wrong project. It's overlooking the right one because those signals weren't available or visible in the first place. So that's really what I'm thinking again, just how the pathways to impact can be assessed, looking at those trajectories, but not that track record on an application. There's a track record of the research that has already happened, but you're not going to look, right, have they published in top journals, but whether they've got a growing influence, a growing collaboration, whether they're working in emerging areas of growth. And there's a lot of data out there, like just emerging maybe co-occurrences of two different disciplines that's starting to grow over time. And that's the kind of data that can be used to see where research is going. And that's what I mean by the research trajectory. So yeah, it's unlikely to predict the breakthroughs, but it can help show those ideas that are emerging in those unexpected places. If that,
Fantastic. Yeah, that's great.
so
That's
sorry
amazing.
I am, but
No, it's
I'll
wonderful.
let someone else speak.
No, wonderful. And that's great. Thank you so much. I'm not going to say anything, but just pass directly to Dr. Nouran, because I know you have lots to say on this topic, right? Like research rather than the grants themselves. Dr. Nouran, how are you doing? Great to see
I'm doing great. I'm doing great, Gareth. How are you doing? Please confirm if I'm audible
you.
and
Yep.
if
100%. Absolutely. Go.
okay, this is amazing. Hello, everyone. A short introduction about myself. I'm Nouran Hamza, pharmacist by education with a master in epidemiology, PhD in biostatistics, and I'm the owner and founder of several clinical research companies. 60% of the times, we are the reactive part. We had seen how clinical research and the funders' monies can be lost or maybe not allocated right. And as a short answer, and as a data person who was involved in several clinical research, medical education, quality improvement grants as a receiver, and I had also sat on the other side of the table. I had been a panelist with several venture capitals evaluating the medical innovations. So I had seen both sides. Saying this, my prediction is centered on AI as a tool just for checking the methodological integrity. Not, I don't think it will be maybe something for production engine or something like that. And also, I don't think it will solve the bad science. But it will change how we identify the good science in the next maybe 2 to 5 years. We might move away from the prestige metrics, okay, and follow the visibility metrics. I'm pointing here to some notes I had written previously because I do really have some sort of healthy skepticism around this topic. If I might say, AI-driven models can allow us to stress test a proposal's methodology, the true visibility, if those applicants can really make the work they are claiming that they would make. And maybe we can assess the integrity of the project in real time through AI models and simulation and identify high-risk projects. So we can know whose applicant can have the highest probability of the actual work. So I think the future of funding belongs to those who can do it. That's a very, very, very short answer.
That's fantastic. It's fantastic. And I think it's aligned really well with what Anne was saying just before, that this really is about the researchers now rather than the projects. And we can use hopefully AI to identify like where researchers are working, like new subject areas that are emerging, and where funding could be and should be allocated potentially by funding agencies. So Mathïs, you have comments both on peer review of grant applications and also your perspective on AI in this area. How are you today?
Yeah, I'm very fine. Thank you for the invitation. I guess there is a lot of views to have on a lot of things that are happening in research today. And clearly, I agree with Han. We are not looking at the horizon of years, but more like months in terms of how things are changing fast. So it's quite impressive. So on the question of AI specifically, I think AI will impact the way we measure scientific research, but not in the way you think. It's not it will be a good predictor. It's more that because of AI, we will lower the trust that we have on existing metrics. I think one of the mistakes we have done with existing prestige metrics is that we've mistaken knowledge for words. It's not because something is written that it becomes knowledge. And that was the case for both papers, but also reviews. And so I think this mistake is becoming extremely visible now because of AI. And so that's why things are changing. And the trust that we put in those metrics is clearly in decrease, if not in decline. And so what I think the impact will be is that scientific vendors will look for other ways to evaluate scientific research. I guess that's what Dr. Nouran was saying just before me, is that we are looking on other ways we can build upon trust to say we should fund that project and not that project. And we're looking at other impact than just having a publication or having some publication as the outcomes of research. We want more. One of the arguments and one of the things we fight for at Bycelium is trying to have a metric on actually did the evidence you have provided change the credibility of hypothesis, because I think that's what matters in the end. If you change the credibility of the hypothesis with evidence, you have done scientific progress. So other ways to measure scientific progress are clearly on the rise thanks to AI, because it lowers the trust of existing infrastructure. So I think it will change, but maybe not in the way most people think, because if we do have AIs that are able to reliably predict those kind of metrics, maybe they would use AI as an indicator, but they will not rely on it. We need measurements, and we like scientific vendors will want measurements, not just predictions anyway, to be able to evaluate what they want to do and what and the impact that they have done, right?
Absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much. We'd like to learn more about Bycelium and the work that you're doing, maybe a little bit later in this event. We're also going to come back and talk a little bit about how AI can help us find and evaluate peer reviewers. But right now, let's go to Rob Johnson. Rob, how are you doing? Like, I know you've worked a great deal with funding agencies in Europe, in the UK and around the world. So can we get your views on this? Like, where will we be in a few years' time? AI and grant funding?
Absolutely. Thanks, Gareth. And yeah, good to be with everyone today. So yes, my background is originally in institutional research management. I've worked with a lot of researchers putting applications together, and increasingly with funders, and also as an evaluator and reviewer myself, particularly for the European Commission. I think there's a couple of ways to look at this. So one of them is where funders choose to put their money, and I think as Anne was saying, and the other speakers, AI can be really helpful in understanding emerging areas, what is perhaps happening at the frontier, and where might there be value in redirecting funding. The other question is then when you've got a particular call, how do you actually decide which of the many submissions that you're getting are worthy of funding? And what the slide here shows is that I think there often is a sense that evaluators are looking at journal ranks or H-index of the grant, people putting the grant proposal together. My experience is that's not the case. So when you're a reviewer, so I've been a reviewer on the Horizon Europe program, for example. If you look at that, you're reviewing very large scale collaborative projects. You'll have dozens and dozens of people. I might have a look at who the lead is, and I would probably recognize some of the names, but actually I'm not really evaluating the people. I'm looking, as it shows that I'm looking at the quality of the methodology. I'm looking at the pathways to impact. I'm looking at how coherent the consortium is in terms of the balance of expertise. So I don't think grants are one on metrics as it stands. They are one on methodology and the coherence of the proposition. But as I've said there, I think AI can definitely play a really useful role as a decision support tool. I think particularly in that pathways to impact category, because often in grants, people are putting forward, this is what we think is going to happen on the back of this proposal, this piece of work. And of course, there is a huge evidence base to say what's actually happened historically. So if someone is writing a proposal and they're saying, we think this is going to lead to a spin-out company, and within this many years, it will lead to this much sales, there's a lot of reference points out there that AI can draw on to say, well, that would put you in the 1% fastest pathway to market we've ever seen. So this doesn't look very, very likely. Or if you look at advances in the medical domain, a tool that's used a lot in the UK is something called quality adjusted life years. So how much impact is this development, if this research is successful, going to have on quality of life? There are mechanisms and models that can be used to calculate these things. And AI would be able to kind of validate the calculations and would be able to cross-reference that with a larger data set to say how plausible it might be. So as this decision support, absolutely. And I think as directing where funding might flow in the future, it has a role to play. I don't think we're going to see simple black box prediction or replacement of human judgment, certainly at the frontiers of knowledge in the near future.
Fantastic, fantastic. Thanks, Rob. It's great to get some insights from your experience working with these funding agencies, institutional, and also like the EU and within the UK and so on. Dr. Nouran, I want to come back to you and ask you about how you would, in your experience now, like in the last few years with the development of AI, like how are you seeing differences in the way that grants are being evaluated, like with the researchers that you work with in your region?
Hi guys, hello again. Okay, this is a very, very good question. I didn't expect it, but I believe that evaluated. I believe that grants are now being evaluated based on the who, not the how. Okay. And this is a very big problem because anyone with an imaginary H-index and there are there in the region can win a grant and they can't execute it. And I had seen that many, many times. Okay. So the methodology is often assumed robust, right? But when they execute the things just doesn't happen. That's why we should always stress on the visibility, okay? The feasibility saying that not only who is applying, but what and how they will execute it. Also, I think somehow there are some templates that people are using in the technical parts. In my domain, the clinical research, there are some sort of encryption and the anonymization of patients and so on. There are templates that people are just copy and pasting, and this doesn't happen. And I'm sorry, this is very, very real talk. I know.
That's what we need. That's the point of this. That's why we want to have these discussions. Like, please tell us how you feel. Like, and I mean, I'll go to Anne and ask her like about the data that digital science has, the metadata. Like how is this helping to inform these kinds of decisions? Like in terms of where grant funding should be allocated. Do you feel like because in my time, like this was much more traditionally done. And
Yeah, I think it depends on the call. So we've got a lot of moving beyond the citations. I would do a lot of analysis. So say we're looking, for example, at finding a peer reviewer. It's time consuming, and it's a lot of the time it's based on a network who they know who's in the field and personal networks as well and references that way. But and then that can be biased towards certain people further on in their career or researchers that are just well known. But with the data that Dimensions has, for example, we can look at other areas. So where researchers or people are working in those emerging areas through, where they different disciplines, especially in cross-discipline research, finding people that way. But just looking at the specific proposal content. So say, for example, there was a funding call that was aligned with the UK industrial strategy. And, you want to find people or not just researchers, but like researchers that are working with academic industry or working in academic industry collaborations. So that's the kind of data that we can surface from existing research. So you're looking really for people that haven't done research in this area before, but that are working on it right now and that are working on close areas as well. So those are definitely things that we can surface, and also identifying early career researchers that are just emerging in particular areas, because again, the traditional approach might be to work through networks or who's known in a particular discipline. And a lot of the proposals are might be quite complex. So you're looking for that unique kind of combination of researchers that will give the best approach. One big area as well is to find those conflicts of interest that are not always obvious, by looking at collaboration networks, who's worked with who's published with who's been funded by who. So those are things that we can pull out. And now with AI, it's easier to see those trends and patterns. You don't need to be a data analyst to pull those out. If you have that data model there, AI can definitely be used for that.
oh, I mean, and that's what we do at Prophy too. That's what many we're trying to find these overlaps between researchers and find good reviewers. I mean, I think that's really, really valuable in one way, as we've talked about, that AI can really, really help. So on the subject of AI and peer review, and let's go to Mathïs, because I know you have lots of comments on this. Let's get a bit controversial, Mathïs. Like AI, peer review, grant funding, what do you really think? And then Rob, and then back to Nouran, and let's get some real views like as we move into the discussion section. And let me encourage you, if you're listening to this either on LinkedIn or on Zoom, give us questions. If you're in the audience, you can do that on LinkedIn in the comments. You can do that in Zoom in the chat. We'd love to hear from you. We have many, many people listening to this event today. Mathïs.
You're sure you want me to say what I think about the current system? I mean,
of course.
Let's go and do it. So I think the current way we fund grants is a very bad way to fund exploration, and it's a very bad way to fund the stepping stones that we will be able to build upon. I think, honestly, I think that science has been exponentially inefficient when you look at what we invest in science and the outcome that we have had over the last decades. And I think the main culprit of this is that we have set up in stone at some point that peer review was the cornerstone of science, right? We have said that in the 70s. And since that, I think we have a scientific system that is in decline. because of this. I think asking for the consensus before you decide that this is a good direction to explore is a very bad way to explore. And I think instead of that, we should have rewards and incentives mechanisms that push people to trust their guts and explore things without the approval of others. That would be my advice. And I don't think we have currently a scientific system that allows to do this. I don't think we have a scientific system that allows to express your own ideas and look for breakthrough by yourselves against everyone and against everyone what they think. I think science at its core is the ability to prove the others wrong. That's what science is about. And for now, we don't accept this. And we want to have this view of science that, oh, we have the things that we know are true and so on. That's not what science is. Science never tells you that something is true or false. The only thing that science tells you is it's how can you gather evidence that will convince others. That's what science is about, right? Changing the credibility of hypotheses with evidence. And so I guess, yeah, that's my view on this. And it's quite independent from AI. It's just that AI makes this more visible.
How does AI make this more visible quickly?
Sorry, can you repeat? I didn't understand the question.
How does our use of AI tools make this more visible quickly, Mathïs?
I think because the numbers of papers being published and the fact that it doesn't change a lot, like, I mean, it's quite visible that most papers are empty now, and that when you're trying to summarize like what did change and what is a breakthrough, you have to filter out a lot of the paper's content, if not more than 90%, 95%, 99% of what is being published. So what do we publish it in the first place if it has to be filtered afterwards, right? And so for me, the way we communicate about science and the fact that you have to wait for months for peer reviews to have something that is a feeble quality control. But for what? Do we judge scientists by their mediocre work or by their best work? What does matter? Who cares if someone published a bad practice or a bad evidence? That's not what matters. What matters is to not filter out what would be the tremendous good evidence that would change the way we view something. And so this can be completely hidden by peer review because it's nonsensical. But guess what? Okay. A lot of discoveries that we've made over the years, a lot of revolutions in science has been nonsensical when they first came out.
And can we find those when we look at our reviews of grant proposals? Rob, some food for thought, your comments?
Well, two things I thought I would mention. So I'll put something in the chat that I shared on LinkedIn earlier this week that was just looking at where the effort goes in writing, reviewing, and deciding on grant proposals. And the vast majority of the effort is on the people applying for grants. And what we're seeing now is many grant schemes, at least in Europe, you're heading to sort of 10 to 15% success rate. So, you're getting up to maybe 90% of those proposals, which take, weeks and weeks of time, are unsuccessful. And I think what's interesting in that post, if you read through the comments, it absolutely echoes, I think, Mathïs's sense that there's this frustration in the scientific community about how much wasted effort there is, actually how many people are leaving science because of this frustration at not being able to really make an impact. So I think that's one thing. So I'm very much in agreement with Mathïs there. Perhaps being a little bit more controversial, I think the other thing we have to recognize is that what gets funded is not driven by a considered scientific decision-making process. So if you look at what's happening in the US right now, politics is incredibly influential in terms of where the money flows for funding. So we're seeing much less funding for climate research. We're seeing less funding for health. We're seeing more funding for AI and defense, and we're seeing that in many parts of the world. So if you look at predictions for where things are going, we can't simply look within the scientific community. We have to look geopolitically to say, what are the priorities in democracies and in autocracies in terms of what seems to matter to the politicians, because that's where they will be putting the money.
All right, awesome, fantastic. Dr. Nouran, I want to come back to you, and please give us your honest view on what we've talked about so far, if you can. Don't hold back. We know that you're full of energy. That's why we love you so much. Please tell us what you really think now about all of this.
Okay, you asked for it, and I'll stop playing polite and calm, because the current grant evaluation system isn't just flawed. Honestly, it's just asymmetry of good idea where truth just die in front of the safe excellence. Okay, and I'm saying this as someone who won many grants and had been on the other side to evaluate protocol. Okay, so let us say that the H-index is the scientific Ponzi scheme. Okay, we sometimes evaluate researchers using metrics that related to survivals and the networking, not the actual truth. And a high H index, although I do respect high H index, okay, don't don't expect it the wrong way or something, but it just means that you have been able to join the club long enough to be cited and elevate and expand your H index, okay? And the reality is sometimes that we are funding zombie researchers who are intellectually dead but have high citation count. Gareth, I told you, please don't ask me to pee. Who am I? Okay.
It's
I
important.
actually enjoyed that a lot.
We want to know, Nouran, and you have a unique perspective from the medical, biomedical, statistical side of things, where lots of funding is being pushed these days, right?
Yes. And sometimes big names are often used to launder shaky data. Reviewers look at sometimes the name and the logo and stop looking at the logic. Okay, I can call it something like a prestige tax. Okay, where billions of dollars are wasting on projects that have zero, literally zero execution probability. And there are some key words that I have seen many times in many grant proposals: innovation, AI driven, and a breakthrough something. Okay. So this had become a shield of methodological laziness. I think sometimes, if we are not very, very careful, we would fund a sexy lie than a boring truth. Okay, because I feel that AI is now used as putting a lipstick on a pig. Okay, and we use LLM to write a perfect proposal for research that is physically just impossible to execute in real world, especially that 60% of my cooperations and services are in the MENA region and sub-Saharan Africa. Also working with the underserved communities in East Africa. So you can imagine the amount people are putting there to win grants to help real people. Okay. So I think also peer review is a scheme of a God complex with a deadline. I'm very sorry.
No,
And
we're getting some feedback in the chat. That's great, Nouran. Thank you so much. It's wonderful. It's great. It's great.
It's not a gold standard. It's a subjective filter.
I know.
It's just
I can.
conformity, not integrity. And I will stop talking now.
That's
Okay.
it. Oh no, we
Thank
love
you
it.
so
And I can
much.
see Mathïs is nodding. Mathïs is nodding. Let's go to Anne because we have a question in the chat, which is about AI. If AI is increasingly being used to identify promising proposals or emerging fields, how do we make sure it does not simply reinforce existing prestige hierarchies, well-funded institutions, and already visible researchers? And I'm sure that you have like background data on this at Digital Science that can be used to address this, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, and yeah, this is another bugbear of mine. That who defines good research? Is it because it's in a prestigious journal, or is it because Harvard or any prestigious university did it? And that's human nature. It's looking at this academic reputation. I do a lot of kind of work around that as well. And that reputation has grown over years and years and years. There's a lot of unsurfaced research by universities, new emerging research universities in emerging research areas, maybe in the global south, or that just aren't being surfaced because they're not in these these areas and they're not being picked up. So I think that there is a lot of data out there that can be used at dimensions. We don't just look at index journals. We bring everything into the database for a number of reasons. One is just to be inclusive, to just make sure we're picking up. Like, we're not one to say whether research should be included or not, or whether journals should be included or not. The downside of that is that there are maybe predatory journals or things in there. But again, that has a benefit too, because it allows researchers or early career researchers to see, or universities to see those networks and to educate maybe early career researchers about those, and to see if they're appearing or being caught up in those kind of networks, and for research security as well. But the upside to it is that we can pick up that data. We can pick up whether research is being cited in policy. Those early indicators of novel research, for example, there could be a researcher there that's looking at a particular area. There could be other academic industry collaborations that are citing their research, but they might not realize that this is of interest to a particular discipline or a particular area that industry is looking at. Their research might be cited in patents, like either in the front page of a patent or in further on in the patent, to find like innovative research that's being used. Those are indicators of something that's growing, something that's emerging. And when you aggregate all of that data up, you can identify all of those little clusters or those areas. So we're not really looking on where that research has been published. We're looking at the influence that that research has had, who's been interested in it. We're looking at growths of networks for a particular researcher and their area, and not just whether they've collaborated with somebody once. We can use this data to see whether that was a sustained collaboration, whether that grew into other collaborations, whether that data, even the data sets, open data sets where they were used. I mean, a data from a research project is a product of that research. Has that been used? Has that influenced somewhere else? So those are all new areas that funders can identify now and gather those stories from and those insights from as well. So we're really moving beyond those traditional metrics. Now it's quite exciting, and there's a lot of opportunities there to do this.
We absolutely are. I agree completely. This is such an exciting time. Let's go to Rob and then to Mathïs, but let's look at this question of what defines good research. Rob, I saw you nodding there in Anne's comments.
Yeah, well, I was thinking, inevitably AI is a kind of double-edged sword here. So there are downsides, and some of those have been picked up in the chat in terms of, does it simply reinforce existing prestige hierarchies and hard code human biases in the literature, particularly the English language literature, but it can have a sort of leveling effect as well. So for non-native speakers of English, often in both journal submissions and grant applications, you can suffer just because it's more difficult to express your idea fluently and in English, which is often the language that is used. Whereas AI allows you to kind of work on much more of a level playing field there. I think it also speeds up the time. So there's evidence that shows, as you'd expect, if you're a non-native English speaker, it takes longer to write an article. It takes longer to write an application. And AI can start to erode some of those barriers. So I think it can have a democratizing potential, but we have to be very aware of these downsides and the biases that it incorporates as well.
Yeah, that's what we've seen as well in our work, that this really, really helps researchers. And we've touched on this with Nouran's answers as well, like helping researchers in some of these kind of less well-represented regions to write great proposals. But Mathïs, I see that you're getting agitated to get involved in this discussion. What do you think?
Yes, obviously I am. This is like the heart of what I'm thinking about every day. So it's kind of tingling somewhere. So to me, it seems like what would be great is to have metrics that actually, if you have the dummy AI that just maximize it, it's still great research. That's the question that we're trying to work with at Bycelium, is there a way that we can have a metric that if you do maximize it, it doesn't matter because you do the right thing. So can we have a metric that is both compatible with AI slop and AI scientist in the way that even if a machine without distinctions would try to maximize that metric, it would do good research? And so that's exactly the kind of questions we're trying to answer. And for us, one of the ways to have this would be that you actually added evidence that changed the credibility of hypothesis. Like you change the way that humanity view the world. That's the kind of metrics that we are looking forward to measure. So we have this compatibility, and we don't need this trust. We don't need this non-measured ways of deciding funds and deciding prestige, because every time you don't have numbers, the truth is that you leave the gap for nepotism, and you leave the gap for people to just have people that they like, have people that they think deserve it, have this subjectivity. So there's surprisingly little people trying to look for that answer. Is there a way we could actually measure that well? And I think there could be, and I think there is, and so that's why I'm working on Bycelium, and that's why I'm working on those subjects. So yeah, that's why I was agitated, I guess.
Well, give us the links in the chat, everybody. I also encourage you, if you're listening to this or you're joining us as a panelist, please put your LinkedIn, your connection information in the chat so we can share those contacts. Dr. Nouran, I know you're also like full of energy on this question of metrics, like, and whether researchers should be or could be fairly evaluated using AI in this age of grant writing. Will you give us a few more thoughts on this and recommendations potentially? I'm going to ask all of our panelists in the kind of last quarter of our event today to give us their recommendations for the future, like how can or should AI be used fairly in the evaluation of grant proposals. Dr. Nouran.
Okay. If I am the one who is developing an AI tool to track some sort of metrics, I would call it execution probability index. Okay. In our domain, the clinical research, we are using the visibility questionnaire when we are initiating a clinical research without writing even a single word in a protocol. We just go to the site with a synopsis and having a massive site feasibility questionnaire, okay? And we have a score based on the historical site performance, supply chain resilience, and other things related to the methodology. And I think grants should be also awarded based on that. Not just the university name, the primary investigator names, and so on. And to stress tests. Okay. AI, I think, might be able to do some sort of simulations based on just the synopsis, not the full idea. You know that many grants are starting by a letter of intent, not a full protocol. And I think we all should do that. And I think no clinical trial or clinical research or medical education or quality improvement or anything, I'm talking about my domains, not the other things because I'm not aware about them, we should run methodological stress tests. If AI can break your study design in a simulation, you don't get the grant, period. That's it.
Absolutely great. So recommendations, everybody. We've got like a little bit of time left in our event today. Like, thank you, Dr. Nouran. Thank you for your energy. We'll bring you back like in a moment. Let's go to Rob. Like, is this like something that you'd support, Rob? Like, if a proposal that I submit to a funding agency doesn't stand up to AI scrutiny in its methodology, should it therefore just be rejected? Is that something we could look towards?
Well, I think it is something we'd look towards. What I would advocate for is something called meta research or research on research. So actually, all of these things have potential value, and we need to try it, and we need to document what works, and we need to write that up as if it's a scientific experiment. Let's just not go on hope or trust and say, yeah, everything should move to this way because conceivably it could be better. And we are seeing some examples of that. So I'll put a couple of links in the chat, but in the UK, There's been a process called distributed peer review, where essentially those who are applying for funding also have to review the applications of others who are applying for the same funding. And there's mechanisms to segment that, so you can't influence the outcome of your own application by how you grade others. There's been an experiment with sort of AI-assisted pre-screening of applications by a Spanish funder, the La Caixa Foundation. They've published a paper on that. So I think all of these things have potential, and we have to try it and document it and figure out what works, and then progressively learn from that.
If you have the link to that Spanish Foundation research paper, we'd love to see that. And your thoughts on this? I'm sure digital science has lots of developments, progress, thoughts on this metadata in particular.
Yeah, and it's just interpreting how the data is used. I'll share a link to a colleague had a blog out there this week, which is relevant, so I'll put that in the chat. But in terms of recommendations, I think the main one is to keep AI as decision support. Always we still have to have that human element. Maybe use it to surface those signals to support the evidence from applications or from research to highlight patterns. So AI just informs the judgment and it's used in that way. To always keep transparency, the evidence has to be visible as to how things are done. And then we can use AI as well because of that. You don't want to perpetuate any biases that have already been there. So to use AI to actively check for those biases when we're benchmarking or working at that. And the big one to me is diverse data sources, to really start thinking outside the box, looking at, again, I'm talking about patent citations, policy citations or references, those early indicators that research is being used and it's being impactful. Even Altmetric, our product, would track things like clinical guidelines, which is important for that research is being used, it's being applied in real life. And the collaboration networks as well, it really tells gives a very rich picture of emerging teams, emerging disciplines that are starting to work together. And these are really good indicators of research. Again, I'm using the word trajectory, that something that's growing into a particular area that's ripe for funding, or it's ripe to be invested in. And yeah, the diverse data sources also takes care of those biases and to stop rewarding the already elite and give those other people, the emerging areas a chance.
Fantastic. Wonderful. We're getting some comments in the chat that we're not done yet. We're going to get you to vote for what our next Prophy Predicts will be like. So give us your thoughts. Like, what would you like us to put together a panel on in the next one? Like, what area of scholarly publishing, AI, like research should we discuss? Like, who should we bring for our next panel? And Mathïs, like, again, like, give us some recommendations, please. Like, where to go next with AI and grant funding.
I think you're actually just continuing the discussions of what are the experiments that are being done by funders today. What are the initiatives that exist? There is plenty of things. There is a whole research ecosystem that is currently growing a lot around this question of how do we make this renewal of science happen. So it's great to talk about it, but what do we do? How can we participate? And I think that having events in the how will science change and how the system will go into these other modes and have embrace these new other ways of doing science will happen in the future could be a very good idea on what to talk about next, I guess.
All right, fantastic. If you're listening to this either on LinkedIn or on Zoom, like, do give us your thoughts on this event, our previous events. Like, Alex and the team will post the links to the YouTube recordings of our previous Prophy Predicts events. We're going to get going we're going to go around the houses finally before we close off in our event today and just get like 2 or 3 recommendations from each of our esteemed panelists on what should we be doing, both as a research community, a funding community, and in terms of publishing in particular. These events, I hope, bring together both researchers, people who work in research services, and also scholarly industry professionals to really unite those 3 communities and talk about like future directions. So Nouran, don't be polite. Dr. Nouran, give us your predictions for the future, your 3 recommendations as to what we should be doing as a community. Don't hold back. We don't want politeness. We'd like to hear your real views on this issue, please.
Okay.
The floor is
Honestly, I was very, very stressed because at the beginning of this webinar, I was trying hard, very hard, to be polite and calm. And this is not who I am. Okay, I'm loud and I'm hyperactive and extrovert. So this is a relief that I can be who I am. And
always, you can in these events. Come on.
I know. By the way, Gareth and I had worked together in educating people in the MENA region about the publication and peer review process. And the results are now published in one of the PMC journals. We have trained more than 7,000 esteemed healthcare professionals, and we had followed them up till they got their publications in Q1 and few of them in Q2 journals. And Bob had raised something here. The people whose English language is not the first language. And by the way, I'm one of those people. I'm from Arabic origin, and English is not my first language. Although I had been lucky enough to be surrounded by people who always educating me, supporting me in my career, in my education, in my everything. But I think people whose English language is not the first one are not lucky enough. So, saying this, the way we are giving out money for research today, I can say it is broken and biased. We treat it like a popularity contest. If a famous university name is on the paper, you can get the money. If you don't, you are ignored. And I think maybe in the AI era, where people are using AI maybe for editing their ideas, this can be solved somehow. But we need to look beyond that. We need to look how they are working. If they can do the work, if they can allocate the brand and the human resources to do what they had actually written on the papers. We don't need to deal with this and check the brands, because honestly, the human factor may play a part. And I think AI can be biased somehow, because an idea that can be done in US using a methodology like a randomized control trial cannot be as effective as a real world evidence done in Saudi Arabia. Yes, real world evidence can be messy and everything, but it can do the work. It can reflect real patient and real outcome. And one last thing, we need to stop chasing citation. The current metrics is about how many people are talking about your paper, okay? But by the way, people are also talking about bad science all the time. You might see the X threads and the LinkedIn post, and everyone is talking about the bad science. So the metrics can be not something about how positive and impactful this paper is designed, but can be rather something on the negative side. It can be criticizing those papers. Okay.
Thank you, Nouran, and thank you for joining. Let's go, Mathïs, Rob, and 2 minutes. Like Mathïs, I know you have comments on citations as well. Go for it.
Yeah, well, I agree with Nouran a lot on this, that we should just get rid of that and try to have and to think what would be better metrics. I guess my last words would be around this. Like, if there are scientific funders that are ready to like think forward and be forward looking for other ways to have metrics, well, contact us. That's exactly what we try to do. Like, run these experiments, like Rob suggested, right? Run these contests, see what happens. Instead of grants, we have prizes for people that have had the right incentives. And so that's exactly the kind of thing that we need to do now. So let's do it.
Rob?
Yeah, I'd echo that. And I think, we're not going to see the whole system of scientific funding flip or change completely overnight, but I think there is definitely space for new models to emerge. Fundamentally, R&D globally is growing, and you've got more researchers, there is more funding going into it, so there is definitely scope there to experiment, to find better ways of doing it, and to disseminate that through the system.
Thank you, sir. And Anne, finally, last but not least.
No, just use the data. There's so much data out there that's just unsurfaced. I'm a data person, obviously, if you can't tell, and I'd love to talk to other people that like to use that to get evidence, unsurfaced insights, things that aren't normally seen, and more than happy to talk to anyone who has maybe a hypothesis in a particular area, or we want to look at that data and see where that sits. So I'm just like, use the data to evidence. Anyone can write a good application, but you need to really support it.
Absolutely, absolutely. So this has been the third in our series of Prophy Predicts events talking about future trends in scholarly publishing, AI, funding, writing, research integrity, and so on, developments and into the future. If you'd like to join us for our next one, it will be in a month's time. Like, follow us on the Prophy social media, have a look at prophy.ai. It just remains for me to say thank you so much for to our amazing panel for joining us today. Dr. Nouran, always amazing to see you. Anne Campbell, Rob Johnson, and Mathïs Federico. Do have a look at their profiles, their company profiles, what they're up to on LinkedIn and elsewhere. My name's Gareth, and we'll see you in our next Prophy Predicts event. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And thank you to Alex Charkin and the team for putting this together. Have a great day.
Thank you.